Dear students, a very good morning to all of you. Today's perio class is on advanced diagnostic aids. So periodontitis is a site-specific and a multifactorial disease, meaning there could be multiple factors contributing to the disease etiology, its rate of progression and extent. The most common etiology being microorganisms which are present in the plaque. There are other factors also such as host response, that is how an individual may respond to a bacterial invasion, whether the individual has a genetic predisposition for periodontal diseases or is the periodontal disease progressing due to the presence of an underlying systemic condition. A proper periodontal diagnosis is essential in order to arrive at a treatment plan and also to provide preventive strategies in patients with periodontitis. Hence, the research in periodontal diagnosis was aimed at identification of the disease process at an early stage so that it could be treated promptly and avoid further periodontal breakdown. Now, in order to identify the disease before it assumes a severe state, we should also include the microbiologic, immunologic, systemic, genetic, and behavioral factors in addition to the traditional methods of clinical diagnosis and radiographic parameters while assessing the patient's periodontal status. Now, advanced diagnostic techniques provide with additional tool to conventional clinical examination and radiographic assessment. Considerable advances have been made in the use of these parameters, and these advances will be discussed in this class. So the content of today's class includes a quick review on conventional diagnosis, that is a traditional method of diagnosis, the need for advanced diagnostic aids, the types of advanced diagnostic aids, and advances in the clinical diagnosis when it comes to gingival bleeding, gingival temperature, periodontal probing, and perioscopy. So what comprises a conventional diagnosis? It consists of different steps. So it includes a first visit, second visit, and procedures which are done to aid in the clinical diagnosis. So when the patient visits for the very first time, we record demographic details of the patient as per his name, age, address, occupation, which locality he belongs to, etc. Along with that, a thorough medical history is asked to the patient regarding whether he has suffered with any systemic conditions in the past or currently suffering, whether he's taking medications for that. And also we include a note on the family medical history, whether anyone in his family have suffered any of the systemic conditions. Thereafter, we probe into the dental history of the patient, that includes the past as well as the current dental history regarding any dental problems, whether he has visited in the past or currently he is undergoing any dental treatment for any of his dental problems, and the course of the treatment, how the treatment has been going on and what were the outcomes of the treatment. Thereafter, the history could be supported by some radiographic diagnosis, whether we need an IOPA or OPG of the patient. They can also be used as assistance in the diagnosis. Clinical photographs of the patients are taken if there's any presence of any lesions or whether soft tissue as well as hard tissue lesions. They provide as a record as well as for future comparison of the pre and the post-treatment records. Finally, in the first visit, we would also like to take some impression of the dentition of the patient, and we can make the models and which we can use for record as well as comparison. And even after the patient exits from the clinic, these models of the patient's dentition can be used to diagnose certain conditions which we could not otherwise in the patient's presence. In the second visit, we carry out the examination, that is both the extraoral as well as the intraoral examination, And the intraoral examination could be divided into the hard tissue and the soft tissue examinations. And when we come on to the soft tissue examination, we can carry out the detailed examination of the periodontium and record it. So as you have seen already, the conventional diagnosis is easy, non-invasive, and cost-effective. So all you need is the use of a probe or a mouth mirror, and some radiographs could be sufficient to arrive at a clinical diagnosis. The retrospective diagnosis of attachment and bone loss can be done with the help of conventional diagnosis. And we can only know the disease history, but not the current status of the disease, whether the disease is active or whether it is in remission. So conventional diagnosis is of more a value as an educational and a motivational tool, and it is not precise enough to detect small amounts of changes or periodontal damage which occur in the periodontium. So what is the need for advanced diagnostics? Clinically, the diagnosis of periodontitis is made by measuring the clinical attachment loss. It's loss of connective tissue attachment to the root surface and loss of alveolar bone, which can be diagnosed with the help of radiographs. Now, this information provides the evidence of the past periodontal destruction and some information about its extent and severity. However, this approach does not provide any information on the cause. There is the etiology of the condition, why it has happened, whether the cause was plaque alone or whether it was due to some underlying systemic condition, on the patient's susceptibility of the disease, whether the disease would be progressing or it may just stop at that point, or whether it's in remission, or whether the response to the periodontal therapy that which will be providing may have a positive or a negative response. So these advanced diagnostic aids that we are going to see in the class will help us in overcoming the limitations and provide us regarding the current status of periodontal condition of the patient. So in today's class, we are going to discuss the advances in the field of clinical diagnosis, which includes gingival bleeding, gingival temperature, periodontal probing, and perioscopy. And in the subsequent classes, we're going to discuss about the microbiological analysis, which includes culture and microscopy, certain enzymatic methods, assays based on molecular biology, immunologic methods, etc. Thereafter, radiological assessment using digital radiography, subtraction radiography, carrier, etc., and characterizing the host response, that is inflammatory mediators and products, host-derived enzymes, and tissue breakdown products. So we'll look at the advances in clinical diagnosis. So under that, we're going to learn about the gingival bleeding. The earliest clinical signs of gingival inflammation include changes in the color and texture. This is what you people do in your first postings when we ask you to look at the patient's periodontium and examine them and diagnose, and you often look for changes in the color, texture, contour, etc. of the gingival tissues. So there may be some minute underlying changes in the tissues which may not be detected clinically. Now, in order to evaluate the presence of inflammation, we generally assess the color or swelling or increase in size of the gingival tissues. So bleeding on probing is performed using a periodontal probe, and this is an objective method of assessment. Whereas when we assess the gingival tissues in terms of color or changes in size or presence or absence of swelling, this is very subjective and it may vary from individual to individual. Some may find a red color there, some may find it to be very light, some may feel that okay, there is a change in color, but it is not, the changes are not enough to describe it as inflammation, etc. So a lot of variation occurs when we visually try to diagnose gingival inflammation. So what are the advantages of gingival bleeding on probing? Gingival bleeding is a sensitive indicator of an early periodontal inflammation. So it detects the periodontal inflammation at a very early stage. The presence of inflammatory lesion in the connective tissue at the base of the sulcus, etc., can be diagnosed with the help of gingival bleeding. Severity of bleeding increases according to the increase in the inflammatory infiltrate. So more severe the bleeding, it can be concluded that more severe is the extent of inflammation. Also, the sites that bleed on every subsequent visit have a higher probability of future attachment loss. So sites that bleed on every visit of the patient have got can be diagnosed as having a more attachment loss. However, certain limitations are present, like any force which is more than 0.25 newtons may provoke bleeding even in a healthy periodontium. So if a greater force is used for to elicit bleeding on probing, even healthy tissues are likely to bleed. And gingival bleeding is considered as an indicator of inflammation and disease activity. However, the relation with disease progression is unclear. Next is the subgingival temperature. So local physical changes such as temperature, elevation can be used for prediction of metabolic events which occur in the periodontal tissues. So like as you have known, the cardinal signs of inflammation, the 5 cardinal signs of inflammation, the same are applicable to the periodontium as well. And one of the cardinal signs is changes in temperature. So inflamed gingival tissue also has an increase in the temperature. So subgingival temperature correlates positively with the periodontal pocketing. So whenever there's a presence of periodontal pocketing, there will be increase in the temperature in that localized area. And there are certain temperature variations which are physiological, like the maxillary periodontal sites are hotter than mandibular periodontal sites, and the posterior sites are hotter than anterior sites. Now the chances for an individual exhibiting at least 2 mm attachment loss at one or more sites is 14.5 times if the mean subgingival temperature is more than 35.5 degrees centigrade. Now, there's a positive relation between the elevated subgingival temperature and severity of the disease. That means higher the disease severity, higher will be the subgingival temperature, and higher will be the gingival inflammation in presence of high temperature, and in presence of putative pathogens when found in the periodontal pocket, they are more closely associated with higher temperatures. So putative periodontal pathogens such as Prevotella intermedia, Porphyromonas gingivalis, and Aggregatibacter actinomycetum comitans, wherever they are detected, those areas are known to have higher temperature. Now, PerioTemp is a device which is developed to measure the subgingival temperature. Now, it is manufactured by a company known as ABiodent, and it consists of a lightweight unit, a colored display which gives a colored temperature reading, and it constantly provides a temperature differential. That means the standard temperature for that particular area is compared with the increase in temperature, and this temperature differential is displayed as a readout, and it consists of an autoclavable handpiece and sterile tips, and it provides a direct documentation of the changes in temperature. So subgingival temperature is higher in disease sites when compared to healthy sites, and the temperature of the individual site is compared to the normal temperature for that particular site, and high temperature pockets are signaled by a red light emitting diode. So under the clinical advances, the next topic is periodontal probing. Now periodontal pocket probing is widely used diagnostic tool and also used for the measurement of clinical attachment loss. Now, increased pocket depth and loss of clinical attachment is pathognomonic, means it indicates beyond doubt the presence of periodontal disease. The clinical pocket depth does not always coincide with the histological pocket depth because the probe penetrates the coronal level of the junctional epithelium. Now, in certain situations, it may give a false reading since inflamed tissue provides less resistance to the tip of the probe when it's inserted, whereas healthy tissue gives a more resistance and less penetration. So, in such conditions, a false reading may be obtained. Now, the difference in measurements of the probing depend upon several factors. Now, first is the probing technique, means how the probing is carried out, whether the technique is being carried out correctly or there might be some errors in that. The force used for inserting the probe into the gingival tissues, the size of the probe tip, it can be variable and it varies according to the different companies, and angle of insertion of the probe. Now, ideally, the probe is inserted parallel to the long axis of the tooth, but many a times because of the anatomy of the tooth structure or because of the location of the tooth, whether if it's a posterior tooth, it becomes very difficult to probe and to place the probe into the gingival sulcus at a proper angle. So all these are technical problems, and this may bring about a lot of changes in the measurement. And next point is the precision of the probe calibration. So the calibration or the markings which are present in the probe and how correctly they can be identified and noted is also an important point of difference in the measurements. So the various generation of probes have been developed and the sophistication of the probe improves from generation to generation. Now, the generation 1 are the conventional probes that we use in our clinics. Generation 2 are the pressure sensitive probes, which are more advanced than the conventional probes. Next is the generation 3, those are the computerized probes, and generation 4 and 5 probes, which are currently under development. And the generation 4 probes aim at recording the sequential probing positions along the gingival sulcus. And the generation 5 probes, they are expected to have an ultrasonic device attached to the 4th generation probes for identifying the attachment level without penetrating it. So these are the non-invasive probing systems. Now there are a lot of problems which are associated with the conventional probes. There could be the errors in manual recording, pain which is provoked by probing. So each one of you would have experienced this with your patients when you probe, and many a times in certain areas the patient may just jump up in pain. So this is one disadvantage with the conventional probes. There could be a variability in probing force and probe diameter. Like I've already told you, the probing force between individuals, it varies, and so does the probe diameter. If they are manufactured by different companies, they may have different probe diameters. Some may be small, some may be large, etc. And a lack of a stable reference point, the reference point from which you can measure the different parameters like attachment level or pocket depth, etc. And obstructions could be there anatomically. There might be certain obstructions, there might be some changes or curvatures of the tooth or the roots, or there can be some presence of local deposits, etc. Now, all this cause hindrances in the measurement or placement of the probes. Then angulation of the probe, like I told you, some areas make it difficult to place the probe at a proper angulation, and sometimes there can be certain degrees of variation in angulation. Again, access to the areas, posterior areas, yes, they are a little difficult to probe and use a proper probing technique. Patient cooperation, this is a very important aspect because many a times when we want to probe all around the entire dentition, the patient may not lend enough cooperation for us to carry out the recording as well as probe placement and insertion. So that is a very important point. and there can be large standard deviations. So whenever we record and then we re-record, there could be a lot of difference in the same in the probing depth or attachment levels that we had recorded prior, and the range could be as large as 0.5 to 1.3. So that's really a very large range of error. So in order to overcome the limitations of conventional probing system and to develop an improved pocket depth or attachment loss measurement systems, the NIDCR, that is the National Institute for Dental and Craniofacial Research, they have defined the following criteria, and there are certain points of comparison between the conventional probe and the automated or the next generation probes. So you can see there are certain changes in areas such as the precision, where a conventional probe gives a precision of 1 millimeter, whereas the automated probe gives a very fine precision of up to 0.1 millimeter. Another difference between both types of probes is the pressure or the probing force with a conventional probe is not standardized, whereas in the automated probes, a constant and a standardized pressure or force is provided. And the third point of difference, which is very important, is the changes in angulation, which may give a lot of error in the measurements. Now, with conventional probe, there are a lot of variations in the angulation, and it is subjective, means it is variable according to the person who's performing the probing. Whereas with an automated probe, a guidance system is provided, and so that the probe is inserted every time in the same angulation or within the same range of angulation. So the second generation probes are the pressure sensitive probes. Now these were introduced in 1971, and they provide a controlled insertion pressure of 30 grams, whereas the conventional probe pressure was variable between 3 to 140 grams, which was a very large range. And in case of osseous defects, the insertion pressure could be up to 50 grams. And customized stents are provided to insert the probes in a proper angulation and at the same place every time whenever the probing is carried out. Now, an example of these probes are the Florida probe, which was devised by Gibbs et al. In 1988. Now, this consists of a probe handpiece, a foot switch, a computer interface, and a digital readout is provided. Now, features of the Florida probe include, now first is the features of the handpiece. This handpiece consists of the tips, which are manufactured by micro polishing techniques, and a constant force is provided, and the probe tips are about 0.4 millimeters in diameter, which is made of an implant grade titanium, and it can be steamed and sterilized in a standardized autoclave. 3-pedal foot switch is provided for this device, and a solo operator or an individual without any assistance can enter all the data. It eliminates the error in visual reading, and it provides less contamination. A computer interface is provided where the pocket depth and the bleeding sites can be called out automatically using the sound effects. The color-coded digital readouts are there, and it can be used as an educational and a motivational tool. Now, this constant probing pressure of 15 grams is provided by the coil springs, which are placed inside the handpiece. The edge of the sleeve is the reference from which the measurements are made, and the Williams probe markings are provided. And the data can be transferred automatically to the computer when the foot switch is pressed. So you can see here 2 models of Florida probing systems are provided. The first is the stent model, where 1 millimeter metal collar is provided, which rests on a prepared ledge on a prefabricated vacuum stent. And the second model is this disc model, as you can see in the picture. It rests on the occlusal surface or incisal edge of the tooth to provide as a reference point to measure the clinical attachment levels. Next are the Foster-Miller probes. or also known as the Jeffcoat probes. Now, this was devised by Jeffcoat et al. In 1986, and this uses a controlled probing measure and automated detection of cemento enamel junction can be carried out using these probes. Now, the handpiece tip automatically extends and retracts under the controlled force. Rapid change in the acceleration when the cemento enamel junction is crossed. The working end of the probe has a Michigan O probe markings, that is 3 mm, 6 mm, and 8 mm are provided. And it has an internal moving tip, which is Teflon coated stainless steel wire. And this is circular in cross section and 0.15 millimeter in diameter. And the probe motion is provided by a custom low friction pneumatic cylinder. Now, under the same category of probes, we have the Toronto probes. Now, it was devised by McCulloch and Birek in 1991, and it uses an occlusal incisal surface to measure the relative clinical attachment levels. The sulcus is probed with a 0.5 mm nickel titanium wire that is extended under air pressure. It controls the angular discrepancies by means of a mercury tilt sensor that limits the angulation within the range of plus or minus 30 degrees. However, certain disadvantages of these probes are there, which are associated with the positioning, as it is difficult to measure the second and third molars. Like I told you, the posterior areas are a little difficult, and the patient have to position their heads in the same place to reproduce the readings. Next are the interprobes, or also known as the perioprobes. These have been devised by Goodson and Condon in 1988, and these are the third generation probes, and they are provided with the flexible probe tips which curve with the tooth as the probe enters the pocket area. Now, conventional stainless steel probes push the gingiva away from the teeth and they cause pain, whereas the interprobe gently slide in since they have a flexible probe tip. The probe produces accurate readings of the periodontal pockets with its standardized 15 grams pressure. The probe's optical encoder handpieces, they used constant probing pressure and provides repeatable measures of pocket depth and attachment loss. Now, the fourth generation probes refers to the three-dimensional probes, and they are currently under development, and these probes are aimed at recording the sequential probe positions along the gingival sulcus. So as the probe is walked along the gingival sulcus, you keep on recording the sequential measurements. Now, they are an attempt to extend the linear probe in a serial manner to take into account the continuous and 3D pocket being examined. Next are the fifth generation probes. These are non-invasive, and an ultrasound is added to the three-dimensional fourth generation probes. The fifth generation probes aim to identify the attachment levels without penetrating it. That's why they are known as non-invasive. Now, how do they carry out this measurement of attachment levels without penetration? So this is provided by the ultrasound, which is added to the feature of generation 4 probes. So a narrow beam of ultrasonic energy is projected down between the tooth and the bone from a transducer, which is scanned manually along the gingival margin. The focused ultrasonic beam is transmitted into the pocket in the same orientation, and then the probe is moved along the gingival margin so that the two-dimensional graphic output corresponds to the result a clinician may get from walking the sulcus with a manual probe. Now, the ultrasound gives more information compared to the conventional probe because the secondary echoes are recorded from the tissue at various depths. Now, this is likely that the technique will be able to provide information on the condition of the gingival tissue and the quality and extent of epithelial attachment to the tooth surface. Now, next is the dental endoscope. Now, as you can see, the entire unit in the first picture. Now, this dental endoscope has been introduced to view the subgingival area and it is used in the diagnosis as well as treatment of periodontal diseases. Now, this is produced by a company known as Dental View, and it is also known as the perioscopy system. Now, the handpiece consists of a 0.99 mm diameter reusable uh, fiber optic endoscope over which is fitted a disposable sterile sheath. The fiber optic endoscope fits onto the periodontal probe and an ultrasonic instruments that have been designed to accept it. The sheath delivers water irrigation that flushes the pocket while the endoscope is used and keeps the field clear. Now the fiber optic endoscope attaches to a medical grade charged coupled device, a video camera and a light source which provides an image on a flat panel video monitor for viewing during the subgingival exploration and instrumentation, and its magnification ranges from 24x to 46x and enables visualization of even the minute deposits on plaque and calculus. Now, as you can see in the picture, uh, there is a small area, and with the help of perioscopy, it can be magnified and displayed on the screen, and we can even visualize small areas of deposits which we cannot otherwise visualize manually. Now, the uses of perioscopy is it allows a clear visualization of the deep subgingival pockets and furcations. It enables the operator to detect the presence and location of the subgingival deposits and guides the operator in their removal. Now, using this device, it is possible to do root debridement and clean the subgingival area uh, very well compared to the manual method of doing subgingival irrigation and debridement. It can be used to evaluate subgingivally for the caries, defective restorations, root fractures, and as well as root resorptions. So that's all for today. In the next class, we're going to see some advances in microbiological analysis. Thank you.